I've made this wreath form table arrangement using a mossed sausage set in one of my old Pyrex dishes. I'm Julie from Julie Davis Flower Workshops and Flower Start, the online flower arranging classes. Learning how to arrange flowers without using flower foam is a real bonus when we're all trying to be a little bit more environmentally friendly. For this project you're going to need a pair of floristry scissors, the ones with the special wire cutting part. Ideally, a pair of wire cutters will make things a lot easier too. You'll need a circular dish. I'm using this pie dish, and I've got a tape measure as well so I can measure the circumference of the dish. You'll need some chicken wire, or you can make your own. A couple of floristry wires to stitch up the ends of your chicken wire, and quite a bit of moss. This is sphagnum moss, which is left over from some Christmas door wreath making. So the first thing you need to do is measure the circumference of your dish in order that you can work out how much chicken wire you'll need. So my dish is 75 centimetres. Then roll out your chicken wire. So instead of rolling out with a natural curve of the wire, I find it easier to go the other way so the wire can sit down straight and it doesn't ping around so much. So I need to measure out 75 centimetres. And once you've got the right length, cut through to the other side. I find it easier doing this with the wire cutters, but you could use your floristry scissors. So here's my cut chicken wire, 75 centimetres wide. You will need to measure how large your container is and get your wire to fit. I'm going to fold this into approximate thirds, like so, and you can see that it's starting to make the gauge of the chicken wire slightly smaller, so hopefully my moss won't fall out. The next job is to get handfuls of moss and put them onto the wire and then bend round and to create a sausage shape that I'll stitch together using my other floristry wires. Depending on the state of your moss, you may need to tease it out if you've got any particular clumps and get rid of any twiggy bits. I'm starting off with a snowball sized piece. So start at one end and add in your moss. So I'm going to start by putting a column of moss through the centre of the wire, and then I'll stitch it up. So continue teasing out the moss and getting rid of any woody bits, and you're just aiming for a chunky length of moss running down the centre of your wire. It's quite a messy job, so best done probably outside, or you could put down a dust sheet and newspapers. So this is what it looks like at the moment. A sausage of moss with the wire edges, which I'm going to bring up to the middle and stitch together. So taking my floristry wire and to use that to grip everything together. So start with a casting on, twist the wire around, making sure it doesn't ping you in the eye. And then use that like a needle and thread, going down the length of your wire. And when you get to the end of the wire, just wrap it round a few times just to cast off. And then start again with your next wire. Twist to hold in place. and then start stitching again. And when you get to the end, wrap the wires around as you did before, just to hold everything really firmly in place. This is what your finished sausage will look like. And then just to make sure everything's really secure, scrunch it up just to hold everything firmly in place. And if you need to add any more moss, now's the time to do it. So scrunch the existing moss down into the tube of chicken wire and add some more. So having made your sausage, and just compact the wires down a little bit so everything is really firm, making sure you've added in extra moss at the ends if you need it. The next thing is to fashion that round into a circle and get it to fit inside your dish. And then when you've got the two ends, is to meld those two ends together using these little cut wires to hold everything in place. And push it down. And then I would go through just around the lip of the container, just make sure everything's actually inside your dish and not hanging out over the edges, and making sure you're getting rid of those cut ends of wire at the join and just bury them back into the mass of the moss. And there you have a wreath form in a protective dish that will keep your tabletop nice and dry. I'm going to clear away and come back and start adding my flowers. So now I've cleared away, you can see what a lovely neat form I've got there with my moss wrapped up in the chicken wire with its protective base for my pie dish. And I'm using some very short stemmed flowers. Actually, they're flowers left over from other projects. Because your flowers need to go through into the moss, you'll need to make sure that they're quite woody stemmed. You may find this difficult to do with soft stemmed flowers. I'm adding in a tiny bit of bushy garden greenery as well. This is sedum, or the ice plant. And it is a tiny bit soft stem, so I'm going to make a little guide hole in my moss and slide the greenery in. It is more time consuming working with the moss in this way, but the advantage is you're not using the single-use flower foam, so you're being kinder to the environment. I like to put my greenery in first and then add my flowers in afterwards. You could just use one greenery, or you could intersperse it with different varieties. This is actually the head of the perpetual wallflower, but I quite like that rosette form. And it's on a useful woody stem as well. So just my last few bits of greenery to push in. So I'm using my scissors to make a nice guide hole. Putting the materials in the same direction every time. So I started here and I've moved round until I reach back at the end, and you'll see this last leaf here is resting on the surface of the moss. So I'll put my last bit of greenery just underneath it. Next, for the flowers, I've got a couple of mugs here where I've been saving my very short-stemmed odds and ends. Let's start with that rose first. Recut the stems, make a guide hole. I've only got 2 roses, so instead of splitting up and putting one over here and one over there, I'm going to group them together and have a little focal area down to this edge. carnation stems. These are on quite a woody stem, but you just need to be careful where this node point is if you decide to use carnations or spray carnations, because they do tend to snap just there. So it might be worthwhile trimming your stems down a little bit shorter, and then you won't have so much to wobble about. You can see that I'm placing some of my flowers on the top edge, but also remembering that this design has a side edge and an inside edge as well. So you need to think about 3 places where you can put your flowers: the top, the inside edge, or the outside edge. If you find some of your spray carnations are too small, you can fluff them up with your fingers really gently. It just opens the petals out a bit and they turn out slightly larger. One last little stem of carnation to nestle down there. So we've got the main focal area of the 2 roses, and then scattering of the spray carnations. I'm going to come back in now with my speckled carnations, and because they're white, they're going to show up a little bit more and be a great contrast to that dark greenery. Don't forget to add your flowers to the bottom edge of the container as well, remembering you're working through 3 sides: the top, the inside edge and the outside edge. Putting in the last of my speckled carnations now, and the next thing I'll do is have a good old look and see where I've got any other gaps that I need to fill. You can really keep going and going and going. It depends how many flowers you have to hand. And if you don't have that many flowers, just add lots and lots of bushy greenery. This is what it looks like now, with 2 roses making a focal area, darker pink carnations added in, and then the purple flecked carnations as well. So it really does start to bring it all together. The last flowers I've got are these side shoots, the spray chrysanthemum. I'm just worried though that they're going to be really, really weak and they won't go in, so I'm going to cut them as short as I can while still having enough length and making the guide hole again. If you found your scissors were too big for the guide hole for your really delicate flowers, you could use a cocktail stick or a kebab stick. Actually, they seem to be sliding in quite well without me having to make guide holes, so fingers crossed. Continue working in a slow, methodical way, turning your container as you go. You can ensure you've got a really even distribution of your flowers. And there's the finished arrangement. Really low centrepiece that would look great on a coffee table or your dining table. I'm going to put my flowers to one side for a moment, have a cup of tea, and then come back with them with fresh eyes and see whether I can see any obvious gaps that need to be filled with a little bit more greenery or a few flowers. And there's my finished centrepiece. Doesn't it look great? You can see the focal area of the 2 roses and then the other flowers evenly distributed and kept really, really low. I'm going to dress my flowers up a little bit just to make them even more special. I've got a cake stand, a tiny dish which I'm going to put a candle on and then put that into the centre of my flowers. This is a wax candle with a battery operated light. It's really quite handy to use. I'm really pleased with how that turned out, and I really hope you enjoy making your arrangement too.